All right, so in our final video here on hardware synthesizers, we're going to talk about some outboard gear that can be used to enhance or to add variety to the kinds of worship experience functions that you can create. And so the one that we're talking about primarily here is going to be foot pad additions. And so Robert's got this phenomenal setup here with single notes tied to a patch on the System 1. And so kind of talk us through how that programming works and what the buttons do.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so basically I found myself in a situation where, like, when I'm playing bass or sometimes electric guitar, but not often, depending on the songs, I have extra brain cells that aren't being utilized that are like, well, we want to do something too. And I'm being silly, but basically I had the thought, I was at a smaller church, and I'm like, well, we need pads. We don't have anyone playing the pads. I could technically run MIDI foot switch, right? So I looked around on the internet, and it took me a while to find like the right one for me. But basically, I found a way so that basically, one of the things of MIDI is I can have this Nektar Pacer right here send MIDI notes, not commands, over to my System 1. And so basically, I had to drop the patch like an octave, but it works. So basically, if you're playing bass or acoustic, something with like that takes less effort possibly, and you're not singing, you can then fill in with pads. So the Nektar Pacer has been programmed with single notes, and there's two ways to navigate this patch set. One is the circle of fifths, which is the up and down arrows, and then the other one is the two pedals next to that on the left on top row before you get to the preset one. And that actually goes up or down a half step.
Okay.
So you can navigate either way. But basically, at that point, then, all of these are programmed to a single note based on the key. The display shows your key once you navigate to or from, and then you just start playing. So let's say, Paul, I'm going to try to like talk you through this as if you're going to play.
Yeah.
So let's say we're doing Hosanna by Paul Baloche, right? You could start off by pressing the 1 button because the chords at the beginning are just G and C, right?
Yeah.
Praise is rising, eyes are turning. See, so he doesn't even have to move. He can just go to C because the G note is part of the C. Perfect, yeah. So you get the sort of concept this is. So part of this became like my desire to like, I had to like look at songs and decide, okay, how would it work in terms of like, you know, at one point do I need to change the note in terms of like switch what I'm stepping on and when do I not? But there's been some interesting situations with that. So for example, there have been times where in certain songs I can play two, so I can put both of my feet on the Nektar Pacer and play two notes and then move one of them, right?
Yeah.
I think what is that song? Revelation Song is a great example of that. If you want to start playing that, I can sort of show. So I'm in D major. Well, actually, I'm going to have to switch to G major because even though it is in D, cue all the arguments, right?
Right.
See?
Yeah.
It can be easy, and this is an easier song to do that on. But the difficult thing, though, is, again, you have to have, and I say it humorously, but you have to have enough brain cells that are free and not doing anything during worship to be able to do this.
Yeah.
One of the problems here is it's not necessarily easy because you're playing two things, and I don't want to end up in like a Dick Van Dyke moment on like Mary Poppins where like we're like, the one-man band with all the things.
Right.
We don't want to do that in worship. This is just because we don't have a pad player in situations like that. If I had a pad player at church, I wouldn't be doing this, right? But the other thing is like it can be a lot of mental overhead. So you sort of have to like, I've had to like find ways to remember that I'm playing bass or whatever else I'm playing first and make sure that's mentally prioritized and then like fill in with the other stuff.
Yeah.
So it's been interesting, but this is honestly a way that people can, and I hate to say it, but like, I mean, maybe you have someone that like has some sort of like handicap or something, but they have 2 feet. they can still participate. And I
Right.
know it sounds like a weird thing to say. I'm not
No.
trying to go like any weird place, but that can be a place where other people can help. Or, for example, since this is programmable, you can run your multi-tracks on this. Like, so if you're like doing start and stop, it has other settings for that
Okay.
from the factory. But another thing you can do is say you're a bass player, and your church is like, well, we want synth bass, but we don't have a synth player. In theory, if you have a synth patch, synth bass on here that you like, you could then like program this for the octaves for bass, and there you go. Or do you need a cello? Like, are you going to run this to like Ableton or something and run cello notes? You could. It's just, it's a way to do more, but my setup, like I said, this was like a really niche thing. Like, I just wanted to play pads while doing bass or whatever. So you have to keep in mind that like this isn't going to really work for everyone, but and the programming of this thing was like, to be fair, the programming on this thing almost required a PhD. So
I find that a lot with most MIDI external devices, trying to get things to talk to one another. And once you get it, you're like, oh, yeah, in, out, start. But getting it in the first place is... But so right now it's set up in one note mode. This could be used with programmable chords.
yes, it can.
This could maybe be used to start and stop something, like maybe even just a G chord pad that you would want running behind an entire song. You could start that pad patch, and maybe you have a sequencer or a light arpeggiator, kind of in the background, and so that's just running while you're playing on top of it.
Yeah, it definitely could. But again, it'll be one of those things where you have to program it out. As we were talking about before, like the Roland stuff, you have to have the subscription and their website. This one, there's some guy, I sent him there's Buy Me a Coffee website, you know what I'm talking about, for donations. It's almost like, trying to remember the name of the website where most people do their stuff, that like Patreon.
Yeah.
But it's like it's like smaller than Patreon. It's just like, if you like my stuff, buy me a coffee or whatever. I sent him some money, but like his web interface is amazing. You can like basically program whatever you want here. The default settings have a lot of different places like that. I think there was like a default setting for like Ableton and a default setting for like one of the Line 6 like pods or something like that. So there's a lot of default settings that come with this that are really good. I just wiped them all because I needed like to program the notes, but in every single key. So,
Okay. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And this is a great way to add functionality to, again, earlier we were talking about, this is our God. You might want to be sweeping a particular pad, but you need to run a sequence for your lead. And technically, here's the start. I mean, just depending on how complex you want to make it, you can make anything happen with this.
But that's been the interesting thing as a Christian who plays worship, like with this and with my synthesizers and stuff. I felt sort of like a trailblazer. I'm surely not the first person who's done this. It's just I can't find any good information for anyone who has. So then I sort of had to branch out on my own. So I get it. And even then, the way I have it set up here, maybe it's not visible on the video. I have expanded this with 2 Boss foot switches. This can become expensive, so you have to be careful.
Right.
Yeah. And we don't want to become like one of those things where like we're basically like Borged out in terms of like worship stuff, like we're like all these wires running to ourselves and stuff.
Yeah. Although I will say some of the Imogen Heap stuff with the gloves.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I was thinking like, why not get like one of those? Why not get that with like, you remember how we used to do songs in worship and it was just someone playing the track because someone was doing like the sign language? Like, why not use those the heat gloves, the heat map thing? Yeah. That'd be amazing.
Blast.
Yeah. Saying.
Yeah. Well, man, Robert, this has been a blast getting to see what hardware synths can do from someone who, again, knows nothing. Again, half because I'm lazy and the other half because I'm busy. I pull up my library in Logic and I say, make it sound like that. Nope, the one underneath it. Okay. And so this has been a fantastic addition to my knowledge base and hopefully to yours as well. So from here at Church Tech FAQ, we're happy to answer some questions about synthesizers. Drop a comment below if you need anything, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks.